You're 26 years old, you just got a raise. Let's say you're making 65,000 now instead of 55,000. So what do? You move into a nicer apartment, maybe 1,000 gas a month instead of 1,000 in house. You lease a better car, nothing crazy, just something reliable with heated seats, and you start going out more because, well, you can afford it now, right? Here's the thing. I see this happen over and over again. And 20 years later, that same person, now making $120,000, is sitting across from me wondering why they still feel broke. I'm going to tell you something that might frustrate you at first. But if you really hear what I'm saying, it could be worth millions of dollars to you over your lifetime. Literally millions. Most people think the path to wealth is making more money, and that's not entirely wrong. But it's not the main thing either. Let me tell you a story. Back in the 1970s, there was a study done on lottery winners, people who suddenly came into enormous amounts of money. The National Bureau of Economic Research found that within 5 years, about 70% of them had spent it all. Not just some of it, all of it. Now you might be thinking, well, sure, Warren, those are lottery winners. They didn't earn that money, they don't know how to manage it. Fair enough. But here's what most people don't realize. The same pattern shows up in folks who get big promotions, inheritances, even professional athletes making millions. The problem isn't how much money comes in. The problem is something called lifestyle creep. And it's probably already happening to you. Let me show you some numbers. Real numbers. The kind that should make you sit up and pay attention. Let's say you're 25 years old, making $55,000 a year. You're managing to save funders a month. That's about $6,000 a year. Not bad. You put it in a basic index fund averaging 10% annually, which is roughly what the S&P 500 has returned over the long term. By the time you're 65, you'll have about $2.6 million. Now let's say instead you get that raised to $60,000. But your lifestyle creeps up too. Nicer apartment, better car, more dinners out. Your savings stay at $100 a month because the extra income just evaporates. 40 years later, still $2.6 million. But here's where it gets really interesting. Let's say you keep living like you make $55,000, even though you're making $65,000, now you're saving an extra $10,000 a year on top of your original $6,000. That's $16,000 annually. 40 years later, you've got about $7 million. Same person, same career, but one version of you retired with $2.6 million and the other with $7 million. The only difference? The second person didn't let their lifestyle grow with their income. That's the power of what I call the invisible raise. Now you're probably wondering, why is this so hard? Why do we automatically spend more when we make more? There's actually a name for this. A fellow named James Dusenberry studied this back in the 1940s, called it the relative income hypothesis. Basically, humans don't judge their wealth in absolute terms. We judge it relative to the people around us. You get promoted, you start hanging around people who make what you make. They drive certain cars, live in certain neighborhoods, take certain vacations, and suddenly your $55,000 lifestyle doesn't feel sufficient anymore. Not because it actually isn't, but because you're comparing yourself to a new peer group. I see this all the time. Young professionals making $80,000, $100,000, even $150,000 a year, living paycheck to paycheck. Not because they're irresponsible, but because they've unconsciously calibrated their spending to match their income. And here's the cruel part. That calibration happens fast going up, but it's painful going down. Let me give you something actionable, something you can do this week. When I was young, I did something that probably saved my financial life. Every time I got a raise, I pretended it didn't exist. Here's how you do it. Set up 2 bank accounts. The first one is your lifestyle account. That's where your paycheck goes. That's what you live on. The second one is your future account. That's where raises, bonuses, tax refunds go, and you don't touch it. When you get that $10,000 raise, here's what you do. Take the after-tax amount, let's say $7,000, and automatically route it to your future account. Set it up so you never even see it in your checking account. Your brain can't miss what it never had. I know a young woman started this system at 24. She was making $48,000 over the next 12 years. She got raises that brought her to $92,000, but she kept living on roughly $48,000. Everything else went into the future account. At 36 years old, she had over $380,000 saved. Not because she was making a fortune, but because she understood that wealth isn't about what you make. It's about the gap between what you make and what you spend. Now let's talk about something that really gets under my skin: car payments. The average new car payment in America is about $730 a month, according to Experian's data. People treat this like it's just a normal part of life, like rent or groceries. But let me show you what that actually costs you. Let's say from age 25 to 65, you always have a car payment. Always $730 going out the door every single month. That's $350,400 over 40 years just in payments. But here's the real damage. If instead of making those payments, you invested that money at 10% annually, you'd have $4.7 million. Read that again. The difference between always having a car payment and investing that money instead is $4.7 million. But Warren, you say, I need a car. Of course you do. I'm not suggesting you walk everywhere. Buy a good, reliable used car for $12,000 to $17,000. Drive it for 10 years. When it dies, buy another one. You still get transportation, but you don't hand the car dealership your retirement. Here's another one. People love to tell you that renting is throwing money away. Build equity, they say. Real estate always goes up. Well, sometimes. But let me give you a different way to think about it. Let's say you're choosing between renting for $1,500 a month or buying a house with a $1,500 monthly mortgage payment, plus property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. That's easily $3,000 a month all in. That's a $1,700 difference. Now, if you rent the cheaper place and invest that $1,700 difference for 30 years at 10% returns, you'll have about $3.8 million. Meanwhile, yes, you'll own a house worth, let's say, $650,000 in that same market. I'm not saying don't buy a house. Houses are wonderful. But don't buy a house because someone told you it's always the smart financial move. Buy it because you want to live there, because you plan to stay put, because it brings you joy. Just don't fool yourself into thinking an expensive house is an investment. For most people, it's a lifestyle choice. And that's okay, as long as you're honest about it. Here's what I wish someone had told me clearly when I was 25. Your 20s aren't for looking rich. They're for getting rich. There's a massive difference. Looking rich means the nice apartment, the leased BMW, the designer clothes, the expensive brunches. It means spending money to signal to other people that you're doing well. Getting rich means living below your means, investing the difference, and letting compound interest do the heavy lifting. And here's the secret that takes people decades to learn. Actual rich people, the ones with real wealth, don't spend money trying to look rich. That's what people who want to look rich do. I know plenty of millionaires who drive 10-year-old cars and live in modest homes. And I know plenty of people making $75,000 a year who look like they make $200,000 and have $8,000 in the bank. There's something else about your 20s that's absolutely critical. It's mathematical and it's unforgiving. Money you invest in your 20s is worth more than money you invest at any other time in your life. Not because the returns are better, the stock market doesn't care how old you are, but because of time. $1 invested at age 25, growing at 10% annually, becomes $45 by age 65. That same dollar invested at age 35, it becomes $17. At 45, just $6.07. This is why I get so frustrated when I see young people putting off investing. I'll save more when I make more, they say, but they don't realize they're giving up the most valuable thing they have: time. If you invest $500 a month from age 25 to 35, just 10 years, just $60,000 total, and then never invest another dime, you'll have $1.1 million at retirement. If you wait until 35 and then invest $500 a month for 30 years, that's $180,000 total, 3 times as much. You'll end up with less. About $900,000. The early money is the money that does the real work. Now let me tell you why this actually matters. It's not about the money itself. Money is just a tool. What it's really about is freedom. When you have money, you have options. You can leave a job that's making you miserable. You can help your parents when they need it. You can take a year off to travel or start a business or write a book. You can say no to things that don't align with your values. Most people spend their 20s building a lifestyle that requires them to keep making more and more money just to maintain it. They build a cage and then spend decades trapped inside it. But if you spend your 20s building wealth instead of building a lifestyle, by your 30s and 40s, you start to have real freedom. You're not desperate for the next raise. You're not terrified of losing your job. You can make decisions based on what you actually want, not just what you can afford. That's what wealth actually buys: the ability to live life on your terms. So here's what I want you to do, starting this week. First, track every dollar you spend for 1 month. Not to judge yourself, just to see where it's actually going. Most people have no idea. Second, set up that 2-account system. Automate your savings so your raises never hit your checking account. Third, make one significant cut. Maybe it's the car payment. Maybe it's moving to a cheaper apartment for 2 years. Maybe it's cooking at home instead of eating out. Take that money and invest it in a simple, low-cost index fund. Fourth, calculate your actual number. Figure out how much you need to save monthly to hit your retirement goal and make that automatic. Not optional. Automatic. And fifth, this is important. Find friends who think about money the way you do. If everyone around you is competing to look successful, you'll get pulled into that game. Find people who understand that real success is invisible. Look, I've been investing for over 70 years now. I've seen people get rich slowly, and I've seen people stay poor while making 6 figures. And the difference is never about how smart they are or how hard they work. It's about whether they understood one simple truth. Wealth is built by widening the gap between what you earn and what you spend, and then investing that gap for as long as possible. Your 20s are your most powerful wealth-building decade. Not because you make the most money, but because you have the most time. Don't waste it trying to look successful. Use it to become successful. And 20 years from now, you'll look back and realize this was the most important financial decision you ever made.